Hey everyone, welcome once again to Pathways of Hope. My name is Jake Tan and I'll be giving today's meditation. So, it's the 8th day of Simbang Gabi, at least for those of us here in the Philippines. Maybe across the world, they're also celebrating some form of it. Or maybe, perhaps Simbang Gabi, Filipinos everywhere. But besides that, 2 days till Christmas. And we've been really looking at the nativity story a lot. And it's just more than Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. Although they are the main characters, that's the whole point of Christmas, right? But it's also important how we've been looking at the life of Zechariah, Elizabeth, John the Baptist, so their family. And I think it's really amazing how today's passage talks about the birth of John. So this happens a few months before Jesus' own birth. And it's important because of the role that John has. But I think just looking at this passage, this is the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verses 57 to 66. What's so nice about this passage is just how it unfolds. There's really just like this whole storytelling, and it's just so dramatic in a way. Why is that? Okay, so context, right? So before Elizabeth gives birth to John, 9 months prior to that, we know that an angel visits Zechariah at the temple. So because Zechariah is a priest, right? And he is given a message. Zechariah is given a message by the angel saying that you and Elizabeth will have a child and you will name him John. And Zechariah was like, I'm old, or I'm of age already. How is this going to happen? My wife is barren. We've never had a kid. And Gabriel says, this is through God's work and power, but also because you do not believe, we will silence you. You will be mute. And that's what happens to Zechariah. He leaves the temple and unable to speak. Now, here's the thing. It's important that we consider, like, between that period of 9 months ago and the actual birth of their child, maybe they were communicating in some form. Zechariah in this passage, he's given a tablet so he could write and communicate and things like that. But I just want to emphasize now, fast forwarding to this gospel, verses 57 to 66. What unfolds is how the child is named, or how he gets the name John, right? It's amazing how at the very beginning, we already know it comes in a disposition of joy, gratitude, praise. It's a miracle that Elizabeth can bear a child. The way it's described in the passage is that God has shown His mercy on Elizabeth. So it's a form of love. It's really a form of just that steadfast love that God wants to pour out to His people. And so having this child is a form of love. It's a gift, it's a blessing. So that's the first thing. And then when the time for circumcision comes, in the Jewish tradition, it comes 8 days after the birth of the child. So then the naming. And what's nice about the naming is that they're already saying, okay, we're gonna name the child Zechariah. Maybe they're assuming that they're gonna do this already because Zechariah can't speak. And, usually Jewish tradition, you name the child after someone in the ancestry, in the lineage. And then Elizabeth's like, no, we will name him John. For me, this is the most interesting part because when you look back, 9 months ago, Gabriel gives that message to Zechariah, not to Elizabeth. Or we don't know. We don't know if they talked about it. We don't know if they had a conversation where Elizabeth reads from a tablet that Zechariah had that says, okay, we're going to name our child John or something like that. We don't know. It's just amazing that Elizabeth is the one to be assertive and say that we will name our son John. So what do? They go to Zechariah and they get a confirmatory message. They're like, what shall we name your son? They don't say that, oh, Elizabeth is trying to name your son John. And that's the beautiful part. They just ask Zechariah, what would we name your son? And he gets a tablet and then he writes John, shows it to them. And upon doing that, the gospel says he is able to speak. His mouth is open. He is no longer mute. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is praise. It's like, he doesn't say, oh, I got my voice back. It's not about him. Maybe perhaps the past 9 months, he's been pondering his punishment. He's been pondering his disbelief because that's why he got mute. He's been pondering this whole experience. But, seeing Elizabeth's belly get bigger, he's like, it's actually happening. And then suddenly, he's able to speak upon naming his son John. And I guess it's a completion of the message that Gabriel gave. You know, you might think that, okay, maybe he should be able to speak na after Elizabeth gives birth to the child. And then, wala pa. But it happens when the name is given, when John's name is given, because the fulfillment of the message, it actually takes place. So I think that's something for us to ponder on, that the rejoicing, the fruit of the whole experience that we know that God is at work, happens when the whole message, when the whole promise is completed. I think that's really powerful. And the last thing I want to highlight is how at the end, people are just in awe of like that whole process of naming the child. Right? It's like a topsy-turvy, dramatic, like, wow, how did this child get his name? And it's not a coincidence. You know, even if perhaps Elizabeth, I'm convinced that Elizabeth and Zechariah weren't really talking about it, but yet individually God speaks to them and says, we will name our child John. And it just like coincides together like that so beautifully. And that's the beauty of like being with the Lord. Like, even if you're not conversing about it, it just connects. It just makes that joint resolution together. And I think that's beautiful when we're really praying about something and the Lord gives the same message individually and we're able to share about that. And it just makes sense that, okay, yeah, the Lord is at work here. The Lord is present. And in that way, when we see and read about how John is such a character with, you know, preaching in the desert, paving a way for Jesus Christ to come, from the very beginning, since his birth, it's been dramatic, it's been exceptional, all the way till his preaching, his ministry, encountering Jesus himself, showing everybody that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And I think that message extends to each and every one of us, where God knows us by name. God knows each and every one of us by name, and He wants to use us also to pave the way for Christ in our life. This season of Advent where God is coming into us more and more as a child once again, and really at the end of all time, at the end of the ages, for all of us. And let's remember that the Lord wants to work in that. The Lord wants to work in each of us individually. The Lord gives us the story of the Nativity to prepare the way for Jesus in our life. So there, what a wonderful story. And yeah, we all have our own origin, our own experience of being named. Let's just remember that God knows us by name and wants to use this season to have the Lord more fully in our life. So if you found this meditation helpful, feel free to follow the page, share this reflection, and yeah, let's look forward to a very, very merry, blessed Christmas. God bless you.